Tyla and Douglas Gabriel here with you today. And of course, that's our other avatar. And we're continuing on with our discussion about endocannabinoids. Thomas, the last audio that you did was fantastic. I got tons of comments and questions from people. And I told them, hold off because you're going to really go deep with this exploration of why it seems that we've all been told that this is an evil thing to even consider doing, and yet we find out it's so amazing. So your next paper, you look at the history of cannabis, and it's amazing what you found.
It certainly is, Tyler. It certainly is. I have been spending a good portion of my mind thinking about this topic for decades. I can't even tell you when my obsession started. I think it was when I first heard the term bioenergetics and heard about adenosine triphosphate. And at that point, I worked really hard to try to understand how magnesium and adenosine triphosphate and glucose and these things all work in the human blood to not only nourish us, but to create every single bioenergetic transfer in the human body, every cell that is transferring energy, whether it's from taking an oxygen or glucose or whatever it's doing. That's what I was trying to figure out. And what I had found was the only thing that seemed to make sense was what was referred to in the ancient Hindu Vedas called soma, or they also call it amrita or usana. They have a number of names for it, and when they mix it with water, they call it bhang.
In fact, in our Gospel of Sophia series, we talk about that very thing. But we talk about it without the knowledge that we have today about it.
Correct. Because I had been on a search and I had basically given up until recently somebody was asking us about this craze in this state and in many other states for medical marijuana and the difference between that and cannabis L and cannabis S and cannabis I and hemp and what in the heck is going on, because we were walking along at Bed Bath & Beyond and we look down and we see CBDs in everything, in cosmetics, in drinks, in anything you put on or in your body, and you're going, but wait a second, are CBDs even legal? That's right, they are legal in all 50 states. So it must be derived from hemp, but then you don't know, and so you get confused, and then you're going, but wait a second, I don't want to buy into anything that I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just a craze, and maybe that's all nonsense. So people kept asking us, and some people who have medical problems ask us, going back, we have to get back to way, way, way back in the weeds. When I was trying to say, adenosine triphosphate, if it creates all bioenergetic energy transfer in the body, then why don't we just eat adenosine triphosphate? I want to find some of that stuff. I want to eat it. It sounds like it's the thing that I should be eating. But you can't find that. That isn't the way that it works. That is an energetic exchange in the body. And so there's some other substance that is a lock and key mechanism that actually create the synergy of homeostasis in the body, as well as, even according to what I was looking for, if you define it as soma or amrita, this magical drink, what the Greeks called nectar, and the Hindus called the heavenly dew, and there's many, many, many names for this. Science now calls it pituitrin because it does the same thing, and it is produced by your pituitary gland. And as Tyler just mentioned, it can be found in Volume 2 of the Gospel of Sophia, a clear expose on this without any relationship to what we're about to tell you and what we've been telling you in the previous article and in the last video audio concerning this. So, searching for the magical sugar, because when you really comes down to it, glucose is that substance in the body, but it has to be created by us. You can't just take it in. As a matter of fact, if you take sugar, glucose, or anything that attempts to look like glucose, any sugar, and now they know that yet another another substance, aspartame, is completely a cancerous, carcinogenic, horrible copy of sugar. Anytime you try to copy sugar, as a human, man-made, they tend to create a poison. So I'm looking at honey, I'm looking at coconut milk, I'm looking at dates and what you can do with the juice of a date. I'm looking at
Monk fruit.
monk fruit. I'm looking. Yeah, I looked at everything trying to figure this out, and even the bark of palm trees, the nuts that grow on certain types of palm trees can be extracted, and there's a sweetener in there. There's also poisons in there, and so I'm looking everywhere. I can't find it. And of course, as you know, Tyla is a naturopathic doctor, so she too is on the path of all these things, whether it be enzymes or whether it be ormus, or whether it be these substances, C60, which or any kind of these substances that people take that supposedly are the magic elixir. Well, I've looked at all the magical elixirs that I could possibly
And
find.
believe me, we have, and you should see the kitchen sometimes.
And I take a bunch of them.
Yeah,
because
we
of
try everything. We're very exploratory and hands-on with this.
Well, it's because of my condition. I have
Don't need to go into condition. Let's get back on the path.
The point
here.
is this
Okay.
isn't experimentation for recreational purposes. It's for medicinal purposes. And in the article it says, there's many types of cannabis, one being a drink. The first agricultural plant, the first cultured plant was hemp. And I had, a long time ago, in studying the Hindu Vedas, found that I thought they were saying that there was a plant that if you take the white milky substance, the sap of its stem, and you do a little bit of kind of magic on it, with the way that you treat it, then you drink that, and that's soma. And soma is this magical thing that creates higher consciousness, perfect health, and as they would say, the immortality of the gods. And literally, soma was brought down by Shiva. It was brought down by all these gods from heaven. And the Chinese believe it also, that there were, it's a gift from the heavens to bring this plant, hemp, and cannabis, which actually are together. They really belong together if you're going to look at this, because that's now been proven. Cannabis CB1 and hemp CB2s. Now they're going to find that there's CB3, CB4, and CB5. They're CBD5. They're on the path of all five of them. But right now they understand CBD1, CBD2, and basically they're miraculous, and they have different functions in the body. One is derived from cannabis, one is derived from hemp. Well, from reading and studying, I had decided this, but then you add the ancient Persian culture to the ancient Indian culture as you're looking at these substances, and it became quite confusing. And the thing that confused me most was that ancient India and the Vedas clearly state that soma is derived from the tree of life. Now, what I didn't know is that in one Veda, which I never read, it describes that the tree of life has 5 components, as you'll read in the article. And one of those components is cannabis, and another component is hemp. And so the 2 components have completely different functions, but the 2 together with 3 other ones make up the tree of life. And I had been looking for a tree, literally, the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden. Very nice. I wanted the tree of life. I wanted to be like Seth, to go back to the Garden of Eden, which I actually believe I found a place that may physically have been the Garden of Eden, and it's in Anatolia. And when you literally take what the Bible says about the Garden of Eden, it's a very clear description of this place.
Okay, now you need to get back in the weeds.
Okay, so back to the weeds.
Yes.
So, cannabis and hemp have been called soma, the drink of the gods, or the food of the gods, and it's also been called a weed. And in the West, there was a war that's been going on against it because of corporate interests, big tobacco, big drug companies, big lumber, and basically you can make anything out of cannabis. Between cannabis and hemp, you can make just about anything there is. And you can feed yourself and feed your animals, and it was, that's the reason it was first cultivated plant. So what I found was, it isn't a tree. I had looked at the acacia tree, because DMT is derived from the acacia tree in many instances, because of you can compound the DMT from the acacia root. And it's also the thing that is put upon a mason's heart when they're being buried, is the acacia stem. And it's also a lot of stories were all about the acacia. So I thought the acacia, no. And then I thought it was the 1,220 varieties of the palm tree, which have dates and have coconut milk, two of the also these nuts I was describing, as well as the bark, the inside part of the bark. And so I thought, okay, there it is. Found it. Found the tree of life. Well, where's the sugar that I could live on? Where is this substance? It's supposed to be the magical substance. I took every type of... I met people in Hawaii who I knew very, very well who had lived for over 7 years on nothing but coconut milk. They didn't even eat the meat. They only had coconut milk. And the reason is if you look at coconut milk, it's the closest thing on earth to mother's milk in terms of, remember, a sugar is a high-level DNA structure. And so when you're looking at sugars, mother's milk particularly, you're looking at basically human DNA in its perfect form. And I also had searched into the space and found that in great ethanol clouds, in the spiral nebula arms that we passed through about the time that humans came to be supposedly started their evolution here on Earth, that was the time that we passed through a great cloud of galactose. And they have galactose. This isn't an imaginary speculative thing. And when you take galactose from space and you compare it to mother's milk, it's almost the exact same thing, and it looks very much like human DNA.
That there's a scientist who went and got some mother's milk and some galactose in space and compared it.
Correct.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
This is well known. Just look up galactose. And so I thought, oh my goodness. So, well, okay, maybe that's the origin of some of DNA on Earth, but I really don't believe it's all that evolution stuff. But anyway, the point is I thought, okay, maybe that's it. And of course, mother's milk, okay. Yes, you can't get anything better than mother's milk. So could we live on mother's milk? No, mother's milk is good for you when you're young, not good for you when you're older. So I looked to honey. And I looked to beet sugar and cane sugar, and I looked at the processes to see if there was a way. Because when you're in the hospital, what do they give you? A bag of water. What's in it?
Glucose.
Glucose, sugar, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at all these sugars, and I'm going, no, none of these give you any type.
Why is it that it's so important to find the perfect sugar for you?
Because it's an entheogen. My original PhDs were in comparative religion. And so I've always looked at the rituals and the substances used in rituals and religious sacred attempts to have transcendental experiences, which all religions attempt to do, one way or the other. So as I'm looking at all these different substances, I'm trying to figure out what is this active ingredients that the ancient Hindus called soma and the Greeks called nectar, and they ate ambrosia and drank nectar. And what is this, And trying to figure out how that affects the ichor, the ICHOR, the I, the consciousness that is in the blood. Because as we know from entheogen studies upon what these different cannabis and hemp substances do to a human being, we now, because of modern science, is in the last 5 years looking at the endocannabinoid system inside the human body, and they're looking at the CBDs that are brought in through all kinds of substances like chocolate and cinnamon and cardamom and high spices, as well as the CBDs found in cannabis and hemp. So you look at this endocannabinoid system. And yes, some of these things, they would tell you, eating chocolate was only for the kings and queens because it was a special substance, holy substance. Why? It had a lot of CBDs in it, okay? And so it not only, it healed you, but it did not give you a transcendental experience, what they would call the high. It did not give you the religious experience that allowed, from what all the texts say, no matter what religion you look at, especially anything animistic or ancient, they all say the same thing, that this supposed substance that you eat or drink or both allows you to speak to spirits and turns your body into light. In other words, what we call ascension. So it's been an obsession of mine for a long time. I can't even remember when I started on this. I think when I was a teenager. And I was certain that there was a substance on the earth that would do both, that would basically bring what we now would understand from the Hindu faith, what's called enlightenment, or what we call consciousness. Because what our avatars, Betsy and Thomas, are always trying to tell you is, though we are geopolitically focused and we're using certain strategies, the reality is we are trying to develop consciousness. And the more people, 48 people is what it takes, who have a certain level of consciousness at any one moment is what keeps the earth together. A lattice of consciousness. And these are the things that you would find on the other side of the bridge if you go from our avatars of Betsy and Thomas to Dr. Gabriel and
Douglas.
Douglas Gabriel.
It's hard to keep up, or would that be Odin and Frigg? But the point is, these walk you through different levels of where you can experience consciousness. And we have to keep them separate because not everybody's ready for those levels. But they're open to anybody. It's not some secret. It's out there.
And as we know, and I totally agree, some people believe that THC is, no, they don't want anything to do with it because it creates a high. Well, it does. And you shouldn't be on a high. But if you take it before you go to bed, it's no different than being in a dream. And you don't feel a high. And so there are many ways that you can take these substances medicinally, which have nothing to do with recreational use.
All right, let's go back to the sugar. So we know why it is that you are passionate about finding this perfect sugar. And where did you make the connection between the CBDs and the perfect sugar?
When we studied enzymes together, and we figured out that if your thymus atrophies, usually by the time you become a teenager, then what is directing your immune system? The white blood cells, the T cells, the macrophages that chase everything bad out of your body. And what is the consciousness that drives those cells to know exactly what to grab onto and to eliminate from your system? And so when you developed your formula for enzymes, which is the only one of a few in the whole world that is actually catalyzed, because they forget what catalyzes enzymes. But when you created your formula, which are catalyzed enzymes, we understood after we took enough of them that, at a certain point...
Oh, people are not going to like this because I lost the manufacturer to that. So I only have a small amount now that I've got squirreled away to keep for 10 years until I find a manufacturer. So I'm apologies to the audience. But we'll work on that.
And I apologize because every time I open my mouth about enzymes, people want to buy them, and then
I know. And then I have to say, well, but if
we
there
can't
was enough,
mass produce them is the deal.
No. So all right, let's get back on the path. Enzymes.
So, if you take a lot of enzymes, what happens? First off, enzymes are totally magical, and no human brain or mechanical brain can even cognize what an enzyme does, what some enzymes do in the body. There are enzymes that have 1 trillion reactions in a second as they recognize and use their shape as a lock, as a key to open a lock to set the system of digestion in action. So the enzymes you take in from outside and the enzymes you produce in your own body in the pancreas and in your intestines and in other places in your body come together, and they become this fantastic catalyst if you have the right substances, magical substances like Dr. Wells does. Then what happens is it's a reaction. And that's what also happens now, we understand, in another system in the body that no one even knew existed until 30 years ago, and no one has studied except in the last 5 years. And in the last 5 years, over 500 substances have been found in cannabis and hemp that are absolutely magical and heal just about everything that the ancients said hemp and cannabis heal, which is a list as long as both your arms. And so that's the reason it was always used as a tonic before it was outlawed here in America, because it was too effective. People could not smoke tobacco. They could smoke the cannabis. They could use the oil literally in cars. They could use the stems. They could ferment them and make fuel out of them. Anything you can imagine. The lumber industry was a huge, huge threat in America, and they didn't know how to tax it. And the big barons said, "Forget it. We're not going to allow it." So they demonized it. And 10,000, actually, it's almost 20,000 years of use of hemp, and subsequently cannabis, and then the other forms of cannabis, was completely flushed down the toilet, demonized.
I like how you called it. You called it a 10,000-year longevity study.
Yeah, it's a 10,000, and no one's ever
Right.
died from it,
Right.
and no one's ever had any bad effects from it.
But without it, people have sicknesses and illnesses that aren't necessary, but there's Big Pharma ready to serve you.
Oh, yeah. And they've already made numerous drugs where they've simply synthesized what they thought was the part of, actually I exaggerated, it's 463 known substances as of yesterday. There may be more today. That's how fast they're discovering the substances, the amazing substances, just like enzymes. Almost every time you hear about something miraculous recently, biochemically, it's always an enzyme. Well, enzymes are a system that it's a higher system than your blood system in a way, because it has to be conscious enough to clean your blood system without harming your blood system, while your blood is doing all this other stuff, what I called earlier bioenergetic exchange, whether that be with oxygen or salts or sugars. It does, it's all the same. There's this fantastic reaction in your blood going on, but the white blood cells come in, dance around, take out the garbage selflessly, and then the enzymes come in and they selflessly. Enzymes don't die as long as they're in a biochemical
No, but part of my
stasis.
problem is the FDA makes me put an expiration date on it for 2 years.
Which is absurd, because
which is
enzymes
absurd,
don't die.
So they've got you coming and going.
So the enzyme system, as you know, Dr. Wells, that as we studied it, we were so mystified, and somehow it bumped into my desire to understand how sugars work in the blood in bioenergetic exchange, transference of energy, and the two kind of bumped into each other, and then we sat around and we theorized. And we theorized that there was a system higher than the pineal system, the thyroid system, the thymus, the pancreas, the pituitary, that there had to be a higher system. And we imagined it would be something like what happens with enzymes in the white blood cell system, which is almost as large as the red blood cell system, and we don't remember that. And it's the pumping of your arms that makes it work. And without it, we would die, because we'd be poisoned. We'd be poisoning ourselves immediately. So the white blood cell system it's a miracle that is ignored. And so there's the white and the red.
And in our Ascension diet, because we put together a whole program to show you how to move through this process, we explained the white blood cells and the transformation that they can take to becoming Ascension cells. And we also talk about the red blood cells as well.
And that was before we really knew some of the
Yes.
medical support for it.
Yeah.
Which, as we looked at it, we knew that it had to be there. We knew it had to control the gland system. And we knew it had to be pervasive throughout the body, and that it would have to go into the head and literally go beyond the blood-brain barrier, because it would have to nourish all these pure metals that are going into the brain, cesium, iridium, white gold, platinum, all these things that create hyperconnectivity, which is what consciousness is all about. And so we'd studied the gland systems, and for a long time I was, focused on it. But they come, they're ductless glands. The substance in them comes the way that it is when you're born in some cases. And the thymus atrophies. The pancreas gets so overworked by not having enzymes coming in your food that, people start drinking pop, sugar. I'm not going to mention the names of these things, but sugary drinks, and especially if it has any high fructose corn syrup, it does in your enzymes, it does in your pancreas, and it does in your white blood cell system, because you can't get the poisons out. And it's going as a fake directly into the bioenergetic exchange, and your cell gets to decide, am I going to take the cheap, awful sugar from the sugary drink, or am I going to take the refined glucose, which took all this effort of going through the organs to develop, to offer to me? It always takes the bad, and that is cancers. That's in the...
It's highly acidic.
Yes. The interstitial tissue is all this garbage, and it's all sugary, and it's trying to kill all your cells.
Now, this is anecdotal, and it's only my personal experience, but when I first started with the higher quality CBDs, one of the first things that I noticed was I lost my sweet tooth. And you heard me.
Oh, and which is miraculous.
Yes. I always like a little sweet here and there. And I mean, I just have no interest in sweets.
And then one day, I came to Dr. Gabriel. She has so many names. I have to use them all. I came to Dr. Gabriel and said, you know what? I just read in Rudolf Steiner, one of my favorite, if not...
I said, oh, you know Rudolf Steiner? I think we could have a friendship.
That's right. I think I'd
not
like
a
to
lot
go...
of people know about him.
I think I'd like to go on a date with you to a Rudolf Steiner lecture that someone will be reading, because he died in 1925. And you got excited, and it was like,
oh,
Lord!
Oh, my gosh!
a person who's interested in anthroposophy. So I'm reading in Steiner, where he's speaking to the workmen who are working on this beautiful wooden building called the Goetheanum that was built during World War I while bombs were falling all around it. And the workers were from 13 nations working peacefully to build the most beautiful wooden building ever built, the Goetheanum. What we were looking at was, as you all know, really, we thought it was the pineal gland. And then they said, no, it's not the pineal gland, it's the blood. And then I'm reading Steiner, and Steiner says, consciousness, I'm going to paraphrase, but it sounds like I'm quoting, more authoritative. Consciousness is determined by the relationship of white blood cells to red blood cells. And if you go up a mountain, your white blood cells go down, and that's why you faint. And if you're down here on the sea level and you're anemic, it's because your white blood cells aren't doing their job. And then he tells you how to work with the white and red blood cells. But that just put the brakes on for me. And I said, wait a second. Wait. Is that not what Dr. Gabriel just figured out? That it really is the white blood cell, the immune system, that is completely activated by enzymes, that once it heals everything up and everything's beautiful, it heals the white blood cells until it is literally a system that is basically developing your consciousness. So if you had more white blood cells instead of fainting, what would happen? Well, Steiner doesn't say, but one can speculate. Not that consciousness is strictly derived by that, but there is a relationship between white blood cells and red blood cells that develop that is directly related to consciousness. So when we figured out that, and we're imagining this system in the body, somebody asks about the endocannabinol system or something, or gives me some CBDs from a medical marijuana pharmacy, totally legal in all 50 states. I take it and I have a great reaction, and I say, okay, I got to study this. So I look it up. Well, guess what? The master gland system is controlled by the endocannabinol system. That's cannabinoid system in the human body. And it goes throughout all systems and through the blood-brain barrier into the head. And they recently, just a few years ago, and this is how I had first heard about it, found that what they called the lymph system goes beyond the blood-brain barrier into the outside of the skull surrounding the brain. And I'm thinking, well, that's the most exciting news I've ever heard. In terms of what going the direction that I'm trying to figure out. And guess what? It's not the lymph system. It's the endocannabinoid system. They've now corrected themselves. And it's everywhere, but it's thick through the brain. And that's the CBD1s from cannabis affect that. CBD2 affects the rest of the body, and especially the organs, and it keeps it in complete homeostasis. So CBD1 will make you feel euphoric and create what's called anandamide, a substance that is created in the human body as basically an enzyme, and it travels to the brain, and once it gets lodged there, it is basically equivalent to what we would call serotonin or the dopamine stream. In other words, it makes you feel euphoric. It
Okay.
stimulates your a specific gland in the two glands in the brain, the septal nuclei.
Okay, so I'm learning with you along with this and along with our audience. So your CBD1s are activated in your head.
Yes.
And your CBD2s are for your body. And that explains that when we were experimenting with CBD1s, I didn't get a physical reaction in my body. So for me, it was like, look, I don't want to be high, so I'm not going to take this stuff. But then when I tried the CBD2s, they don't make you high. And they work on your body. And it was amazing. I mean, really.
And I had the same exact experience, and so have many, many other people. They do not want the THC.
Right. So I'm just
because
trying to walk it
it'll
out.
make you wobble
So
during
people
the day.
understand. You take if you want the full effect, you can take both. That affects both parts of your body, and you can take them at different times. Like you say, if you don't like to get high, but you want to take the CBD ones, then you do it in the evening before you go to sleep.
Take the strongest of the cannabis, CBD1s, enrich Simpson oil. Take a very small, a grain size, the size of a lentil, let's say, and you take that at night. You won't feel anything,
And you'll get a great night's sleep.
and your body's pain. What is happening here is,
And for women, the hot flashes go away. I hear that all the time from women who smoke a little or take a little before they go to bed.
it's all about neural uptake inhibitors when you're talking about CBD1s, because you want ones that, in some cases, you want some that are activated. In some cases, you want some that are
Sure.
deactivated.
If it's legal in your state for a recreational high, sure.
And CBD2 deactivates the high of CBD1. So you don't use CBD2s with CBD1 if you want to have a euphoric sense and activate anandamide in your brain.
Very good. All right.
Now, that's one of the big problems now. So as I look back on this, I'm saying, okay, what is it then? It must be another system, and here we find this system. And then we find that just like enzymes, CBD 1 and 2, and there are also 3 and 4 and 5, but they aren't really talked about much. Experimentations going on with them, and there's, as I said earlier, hundreds. There could be hundreds of CBD types. And they are found in natural foods also, okay? But usually compounded spices. So the point is, it's just like enzymes. It's a lock and key. So once this goes in, it opens up a system, but it doesn't leave. CBD1 doesn't leave unless CBD2 comes along to take it away. And so that's the reason that the euphoric sense stays, and why you get that sense, and why it is strong, and why it doesn't go away until you perhaps eat other food, or you time over time, or CBD2 you take into your body through another food or substance, or even CBD2 that, well, I'm not going to get into all the details.
Just all the details. Let's
Yeah,
get
too many
back on
details.
track, because what we're finding here is that there's been a long history, and like many things that we found when we first started out as the Anonymous Patriots, is that it's being suppressed, and so much around us the government suppresses to either monetize it, farm us, take advantage of us. And this is just another story. Like, there was a point in time where we saw false flags being run, so we investigated that and found out, well, it's legal to propagandize American citizens. And so this is just another uncovering we have for you, that cannabis has amazing properties that they're not telling you.
Yes, and I was so shocked because I went back and found many, many references to cannabis, bhang, usana, amrita, soma, and I pulled them all together in this article so that you can really look at this and make up your own mind. The deal is, could the ancient Indians, the Chinese, and then the Scythians, the Thracians, the Dacians, the Germans, the English, and North and South America all be wrong? That this substance is really not what they say it was, and if it is what they say it was literally the drink of the gods, and that it was brought from heaven down to the earth, exactly as I mentioned in a talk which some people may find crazy, the same thing happened with what they thought about horses. And notice, the horses ate the hemp, and the people with the horses traveled with hemp and cannabis, and they used both, but they used every speck of it, and they fed the stock to their horses. And so the horses were being given hemp from the beginning.
So with the hemp, they were getting their CBD2s, and with the cannabis, the CBD1s?
Yeah, and these horses are becoming very obviously intelligent, and look at the way they've been crossbred into the animal that has basically defined history. And if you talk about the hordes that have come off the steppes, and what has come out of Central Asia and north of that, the Siberian areas, we see this cultivation of this crop goes along with horses and the wheel, chariot, agriculture, you name it. It as well as medicinal, long, ancient texts about how to handle these substances and what they heal, how to get them, how to treat them, how to use them in special ways. So the ancients understood this in great detail, and I did not know that they absolutely clearly say soma is cannabis. And so I finally found the tree of life, and it is better than a perfect sugar. It is the thing that tells a perfect sugar how to catalyze itself.
This is such a fascinating subject that Douglas has prepared an article, and it is in the link in the description box if you're on YouTube. But if you're on our site, we've got it all bundled together with the last YouTube that you did, Douglas, and this one with the articles. So if you didn't follow along with everything that Douglas said, don't worry, because the article is there in a written form. Any closing remarks?
Yes, I also put a timeline in which shows the way that the corporate interests have been in a war against cannabis for their own greed and for their own selfishness and for making sure that humans don't get what they don't want you to have. I think I did a double negative. But they don't want you to have consciousness, and they don't want you to be awake enough to say no to tobacco or no to drugs or no to chopping down trees, when you can grow an annual crop that doesn't hurt anything, enriches the soil, and gives you almost every substance you can imagine that you need to live. So the point is the timeline shows that, and then it's up to you. Do with it what you want. We are, as Tyler said earlier, we do research. That's what we do. People ask us. I've been researching all my life. So this fulfills some research for me, but it opens up the fact that until science gets on board and really starts to move forward with allowing complete research into both of these two plants and the way they work together for the human being, I'm afraid that we are missing out on the best kept drug, medicine, and useful product of the last 20,000 years.